Alright, welcome everyone. Now, in our previous lecture, क्या discuss किया था हमने? The round table conference we had discussed, right? So, round table conference, when did it take place? In 1930, first round table conference, right? Congress boycotted it. Civil disobedience movement was still going on. It was sustained for about a year before the industrialists and the shopkeepers, the trading community, began to withdraw its support. It did not do so explicitly, but pressure within the Congress from the industrialist section kept on building up to find a compromise, to reach a compromise with the government. And this created the background for the Gandhi-Irwin Pact of 1931, right? So, on the one hand, the industrialists were building pressure within the Congress for the Congress to negotiate a settlement, a truce with the government. On the other side, the government was also becoming desperate because the non-participation, the absence of the Congress from the roundtable conference had been a big humiliation, had been a big embarrassment for them. This was supposed to be an international media gala, right? Where the British were supposed to showcase how well they were running their empire with the consensus and the support of all Indians. But since the largest party in India had not participated, this had fallen flat on its face. Therefore, the government was also looking for a truce, right? This prepared the background for the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. Likho. By early 1931, by early 1931, comma, the Congress, the Congress had been facing pressure from the industrialists, from the industrialists to make a compromise with the government, with the government. Full stop. They wanted the civil disobedience movement to be suspended. They wanted the civil disobedience movement to be suspended due to building financial strain, due to building financial strain. Full stop. Next point. On the other hand, comma, the government was also desperate for a compromise, was also desperate for a compromise, since the absence of the Congress from the first roundtable conference had been a big source of embarrassment, had been a big source of embarrassment and the process of constitutional reform had been halted, had been halted. Next point, main point. Thus, on the 5th of March 1931, on the 5th of March 1931, comma, Mahatma Gandhi was invited by Governor General Irwin for an open dialogue, resulting in the signing of the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, Gandhi-Irwin Pact. What was the nature of this pact? It was a compromise. Therefore, the Congress would sacrifice some things and the government would agree to certain Congress demands. What was agreed? Write down. The two sides agreed that the civil disobedience movement would be suspended. The civil disobedience movement would be suspended. B. The Congress would attend the second RTC, the second roundtable conference. Right? So these were to the benefit of the government, right? So the Congress would also expect something in return. What did it get? See, the salt law was amended. Full stop. The production of salt for private consumption would not require a license. That means for purely consumption purposes, people would be allowed to manufacture salt on their own without the need for any license. Before this, a government license was necessary for the manufacturing of salt, both for consumption as well as for commercial purposes. Okay. Next, write D. The government would release all political prisoners. Right? That means those people in prison who were not there for serious crimes, for criminal activities, but for political acts. E. Private property that had been confiscated would be returned if it was not already auctioned off. Okay? Next, F. The peaceful picketing of shops selling liquor was allowed. Okay, so these were the terms of the pact. These two things the Congress gave to the government, the rest the government agreed to the Congress demands. Clear? Now what was the significance of the Gandhi-Irwin Pact? बताइए, tell me. See, first of all, the signing of the Gandhi-Irwin Pact was a remarkable development. It was the first time that an Indian had been invited by the Governor General for equal negotiations, and this signaled the rising stature of Mahatma Gandhi as well as the power of the Congress's popular movement. Okay? So first of all, write down number 1 or A. The Gandhi-Irwin Pact represented the first instance in which Indians had been treated as equals by the British, represented the first instance that Indians had been treated as equals by the British. Full stop. Mahatma Gandhi was the first Indian to be invited for a direct dialogue with the Governor General. Full stop. This was proof of the growing popularity of the Congress's movement and Gandhi's stature as India's national leader. Full stop. The government was not in a position to neglect the Congress and its participation in the Round Table Conference was considered essential for its success. Okay? So by signing the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, the government had essentially agreed to this position. Okay? That without the Congress, no future developments could take place. B. What else? और बताइए. Gandhi-Irwin Pact also signified something else. Yeah. That the Congress was not immune to the pressure of the business interests of the industrialists, that it was being sustained not only by popular energy and enthusiasm, but the cooperation of a wide spectrum of collaborators, okay, in which the Congress had to look after the interests of each group equally. And since the industrialists were the ones who had forced the Congress towards the negotiating table, this means that at this point of time, at least, the industrialists were acting as a very important pressure group within the Congress. And therefore, while the ideology of socialism was becoming more influential, it had not yet become powerful enough to eclipse the interests of the business class, of the industrialist class. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट पॉइंट राइट डाउन बी. लिखो, द कांग्रेस had agreed to any compromise with the government, primarily under the pressure of powerful business groups, full stop. This proves that despite the growth of the socialist ideology, comma, the industrialists remained an important pressure group, full stop. Further, it also showcases the close relationship between the industrialists and Mahatma Gandhi. Full stop. Sub point. This also shows that the Congress movement could not be sustained on popularity alone. Stop. In fact, it was a grand collaborative exercise. Between different interest groups. ठीक है, next, see, now what were the terms under which the Gandhi-Irwin Pact had been signed? किस बेसिस पे नेगोशिएशन हुआ था? On the basis of the provisions of the pact, things must be becoming clear. What was the source of these demands? When had they been first raised? By Mahatma Gandhi in the beginning of the civil disobedience movement. ठीक है? And what does this tell us? That this was the grounds on which the negotiation took place. that Mahatma Gandhi's prediction and foresight had proven to be correct. He had displayed an uncanny ability to deal with the government, and the Congress had been proven right by entrusting the leadership of the next movement into his hands. Okay, write down the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. The Gandhi-Irwin Pact was negotiated on the basis of Mahatma Gandhi's 11-point demands, which he had raised as a prelude to the civil disobedience movement. Full stop. The government had to fulfill some of these promises in order to conclude the pact. Full stop. Subpoint. This proves Mahatma Gandhi's uncanny ability to tackle the British, and also validated his satyagraha strategy once again. Full stop. It also proved the Congress right for entrusting Mahatma Gandhi with the leadership of the movement. ठीक है? But this argument has a different side also. How many demands had Mahatma Gandhi raised? 11 different demands, out of which progress was made only on 4 of these demands, and that too not to the extent that Mahatma Gandhi had initially demanded. For example, he had demanded the complete abolition of the salt tax. This was not given, right? Confiscated property was to be returned, political prisoners were to be released, peaceful picketing of liquor shops was to be allowed, but there was no complete prohibition on liquor and other intoxicants. Finally, the most crucial demands of Mahatma Gandhi had not been addressed. The government had failed to introduce any protections for the Indian industries. It had failed to manipulate the exchange rate in favor of the Indian industrialists. It had not made any promises or indications regarding its policy on land revenue, and most importantly, there had been no indication that the government would be willing to entertain even the idea of inquiry into police brutalities during the civil disobedience movement and the previous anti-Simon Commission agitation. Okay? Therefore, while some of these demands had been accepted, many of the most crucial demands had not been accepted. In fact, they were not even considered, they were rejected by the government outright. What does this show? That the Congress was also almost equally as desperate as the government to reach a settlement, and this was a chink in the armor of Mahatma Gandhi's strategy. अभी तक तो he had been proven right, but this time it was altering. While success had been achieved, but it was not complete success, or success to a degree that it would have satisfied any rational nationalist. Not even Mahatma Gandhi was entirely satisfied with it. ठीक है, next point लिखो. While the Gandhi-Irwin Pact had symbolized a major achievement, many of Mahatma Gandhi's original demands remained unfulfilled. Many of Mahatma Gandhi's original demands remained unfulfilled. Full stop. Subpoint. The pact offered no protection. The pact offered no protection to Indian industries. Full stop. Next subpoint. There was no discussion on strengthening the rupee against the pound. No discussion on strengthening the rupee against the pound. Next point, the salt tax remained in place. Full stop. Next point, there was no prohibition on intoxicants. There was no prohibition on intoxicants. Next point, no discussion was started. No discussion was started on the issue of land revenue. On the issue of land revenue. Lastly, you can write, the government refused to even entertain the question of inquiry into police brutalities. The question of inquiry into police brutalities. Full stop. Next main point लिखो. Therefore, while the government had been successfully brought to the negotiating table, comma, weaknesses within the own movement of the Congress, prevented substantial progress. Full stop. This had exposed weaknesses in the Gandhian strategy, creating space for the further growth, of socialism within the national movement. Further growth of socialism within the national movement. And this aspect is going to manifest itself immediately after the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. कहाँ पर? In the Karachi Session, where while the Congress gave its approval to the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, it also introduced its socialist agenda under the influence of the younger nationalists, primarily Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose. ठीक है, तो ये हो गया the significance of the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. Clear है इतना? Take down a question. Discuss the circumstances leading up to the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. Full stop. What was its significance for the national struggle? (200 words, 50 marks. ठीक है, तो after Gandhi-Irwin Pact, next significant development, the Karachi Session of 1931. The Gandhi-Irwin Pact had been signed between Mahatma Gandhi and the Governor General Irwin. It needed to be endorsed by the Congress to become official Congress policy. And the Gandhi-Irwin Pact provided the occasion for the Congress to organize a special session in order to deliberate upon the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, that pact. This special session was held at Karachi in April of 1931, 1 month after the Gandhi-Irwin Pact was signed. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel was elected as the president of the Karachi Session. What were the important decisions that were made by the Gandhi-Irwin by the Congress at its Karachi Session? It endorsed the Gandhi-Irwin Pact and it agreed to participate in the second roundtable conference. It also decided who would represent the Congress at the second roundtable conference. किसको pick किया? Mahatma Gandhi को pick किया. So Mahatma Gandhi was chosen by the Congress to represent it at the second roundtable conference. At the same time, the Congress also announced its commitment to a socialistic pattern of development. Jawaharlal Nehru introduced two prominent resolutions, namely a resolution on fundamental rights and the resolution on a new economic policy, which made the Congress commit itself to the socialistic pattern of development, especially the new economic policy. This was also significant because within these resolutions was hidden the key to explaining what a Swaraj or Poon Swaraj would look like for the masses, for the common people. It elevated the idea of independence from simple political independence from foreign domination to social and economic independence. It emphasized upon issues such as equality, dignity. It also gave certain fundamental rights which were of an inalienable nature. It emphasized upon ideas such as universal adult franchise, and the Congress, although it had given its approval to the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, also reiterated its commitment to the ultimate objective of Poon Swaraj. Okay? So the Poon Swaraj demand was put forward once again. Is this clear? So, Karachi Session 1931. लिखो, the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, the Gandhi-Irwin Pact prepared the occasion for the Congress to organize a special session to ratify it. Full stop. It was held. Next point. It was held at Karachi in April 1931. Full stop. It was held at Karachi in April 1931 with Sardar Patel as president. Full stop. At this session, comma, the following developments took place. A. The Congress ratified the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. B. It agreed to attend the second round table conference and nominated Mahatma Gandhi as its representative. C. The demand for Poona Swaraj was reiterated. The demand for Poona Swaraj was reiterated. And D. Pandit Nehru introduced two historical resolutions namely Fundamental Rights Resolution and New Economic Program Resolution, which clearly defined what Swaraj would mean for the masses, or would mean to the masses for the first time. For the first time. So stop. Two subheadings. First one, resolution on fundamental rights. Second one, resolution on new economic program. Resolution on fundamental rights. What were the contents? What kind of fundamental rights did the Congress envisage for the people of India? Civil liberties, right to free speech, free movement, assembly, association, protest, etc. Okay, वो सब write down. Number one, the right to freedom, the right to freedom of speech, expression, movement, right to freedom of speech, expression, movement, assembly, and association. Okay. Second, right to equality, right to equality, including equal rights for both men and women, for both men and women. Number three, universal adult franchise, universal adult franchise. ठीक है. Number four, protection of the cultural rights of minorities, protection of the cultural rights of minorities. And number five, right to free primary education, right to free and compulsory primary education. Okay. By doing this, what kind of recipe was the Congress preparing? A recipe for a modern democratic and free society in which all would be treated as equals, secularism would be protected, the rights of the minorities would be secured, and a scientific society in which education would become the basis for equality, development and dignity. Okay? So that is the significance of this resolution on fundamental rights. Secondly, where have many of these fundamental rights been taken from? From the Nehru report. So the Congress was also building upon its earlier legacy. It was not letting go of its earlier legacy even while doing this. Okay. Next, second subheading, resolution on new economic policy. A resolution on new economic policy. What did it promise? Write down. Number one, relief from agrarian debt. Relief from agrarian debt. Number two, reduction in land revenue. Number 3, tenancy reform. Tenancy reform, including security of tenure for peasants. Including security of tenure for peasants. Number 4, better working conditions and higher wages for workers in industry. And number 5, the right of peasants and workers to form unions and bargain collectively. ठीक है? So clearly, what was the agenda over here? All these demands are in the interests of peasants and workers, the working class, right? And which ideology stands up for the interests of the working class? The socialist ideology, a socialistic pattern of economic development. Clear hai? Significance of these resolutions. वही सबसे पहला तो rising influence of socialism and Congress's commitment to a socialistic pattern of development. Write down. With these resolutions, the Congress fully committed itself to the socialist objective of creating the socialist objective of creating a fair and equal society. Full stop. Sub point. The Congress would follow this up by supporting which movements? The trade union movement and the Kisan Sabha movements. The trade union movements and the Kisan Sabha movements. Full stop. This would, next point, this would also result in the introduction of economic planning. Okay. After independence, obviously, the 5-year plan system was formalized from 1951 onwards, but even before this, the Congress came up with its financial plans, plans for economic development, such as in 1938 it came up with the new economic plan, right? And in 1944 with the Bombay plan, right? So write down example: the New Economic Plan of 1938 and Bombay Plan of 1944. Full stop. Next, number 2. These resolutions, especially the resolution on fundamental rights, prepared the platform for advocacy towards a free, open, democratic and secular society. Full stop. Subpoint. Education became the motto for development and progress. It emerged as the great equalizer. Full stop. Next subpoint. Further, comma, the Congress also prepared a pathway towards a rational society, that would overcome obstacles and make decisions collectively. ठीक है. Next main point, number 3. These resolutions clearly defined what independence would mean for the masses. For the first time. These resolutions clearly defined what independence would mean for the masses for the first time. Subpoint. It would not simply be political independence from foreign rule. Full stop. Instead, the underprivileged sections would also be liberated from their historical bondage with social and economic justice. Full stop. Next main point. These resolutions while signaling a major shift, did not signify a complete break from the past. Did not signify a complete break from the past. Full stop. Subpoint. Instead, the Congress built upon the legacy of the Nehru report by endorsing many of its recommendations. ठीक है? So this was the Gandhi-Irwin Pact and the Karachi Session. Next main point लिखो, or sorry, next subheading दो, aftermath. In accordance with the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, comma, Mahatma Gandhi represented the Congress at the second round table conference in 1931. Full stop. Next point. However, this round of talks ended in a deadlock as no consensus could be created on important issues such as separate electorates, comma, reservations for minorities, comma, protections for the depressed classes, comma, the scope of responsible government, and the participation of princely states in an all India federation. Full stop. Next point. The government blamed Indians for being unable to reach a consensus, while the Congress blamed the government for deliberately derailing the negotiations. Full stop. Next point. Therefore, the second round table conference also ended in failure. Also ended in failure. Full stop. Next point. Mahatma Gandhi returned to India and the civil disobedience movement resumed. And the civil disobedience movement resumed. Full stop. However, the earlier energy could not be revived. And popular response remained low. Okay? The momentum had been lost and the Congress could not build it up again. Next point. On the other hand, the government tried to further divide the Indian nationalists with what? With the McDonald Award. Okay? So this was the aftermath. So although the second roundtable conference failed and the Congress resumed the movement, it could never regain its momentum. The Congress would also boycott the third roundtable conference, and overall the roundtable conferences would fail to yield any meaningful results. It would also demonstrate the failure of the British in the eyes of the international community in governing its empire. The Congress would sustain the movement for a couple of years before finally admitting defeat and permanently withdrawing the movement in 1934. But in the meanwhile, the government further tried to sow the seeds of discord with the McDonald Award. (1932). What does it refer to? Separate electorates for the depressed classes. It is also known as the Communal Award. What was the background for this? Dr. Ambedkar, ever since the Simon Commission period, had been demanding separate electorates for the depressed classes. What was his argument? That the depressed classes, that is the Dalits or untouchables, are treated by the upper castes as outcasts. Therefore, they are not part of the Hindu fourfold Varna system. They do not have any Varna. Since they are treated as outcasts, they are not actually Hindu. In fact, they constitute a separate community, and this community is a minority numerically. Since the principle of minority representation in Indian politics since 1909 has been that of separate electorates, the same principle must be applied to this new religious community, that is the Dalits. and separate electorates must be granted to the Dalits as well, to the depressed classes as well. The government was becoming increasingly frustrated because of its inability to win the support and confidence of the nationalists, and then resorted to its default position, that is divide and rule. In this demand, the government saw a golden opportunity to permanently divide and fracture the Indian society and permanently weaken Indian nationalism. Therefore, in 1932, the British Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald announced his award of separate electorates for the depressed classes. ठीक, लिखो. Dr. Ambedkar had been demanding separate electorates for the depressed classes ever since the Simon Commission's visit to India. The Simon Commission's visit to India. Full stop. He had reiterated this demand. In all the round table conferences. Full stop. Next point. He argued that the depressed classes or untouchables were not considered part of the Hindu fourfold Varna system. Full stop. Therefore, comma, they were not actually Hindu. Full stop. Rather, they constituted a religious minority outside Hinduism. Full stop. Next point. As such, comma, the principle of minority representation in electoral politics should be applied to them as well. Full stop. Other religious minorities such as Muslims, Sikhs, Christians and Anglo-Indians had been granted separate electorate. Full stop. Thus, the depressed classes must be granted the same. Full stop. Next point, frustrated by the failure of the round table conferences, and the resumption of the civil disobedience movement, comma, the British government reverted to its tried and tested policy of divide and rule. Next point, in 1932, the British Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald announced his infamous Communal Award, recognizing India's depressed classes. His infamous Communal Award, recognizing India's depressed classes as a religious minority, and granted separate electorates for them. Full stop. Okay. Now, how did the Congress and Mahatma Gandhi respond to this? They opposed it. Okay. So, next subheading, Gandhi's response. Now, after having resumed the civil disobedience movement, the government had arrested Mahatma Gandhi, and at the time that this award was announced, Mahatma Gandhi was in the Poona jail, in the Yerwada jail at Poona. When he got to know about this development, he immediately went on a fast unto death. In protest against this award, and also to pressurize Dr. Ambedkar to reach a new settlement. Okay? What was Mahatma Gandhi's reason for the opposition to the MacDonald Award? Twofold reasons. First of all, that it would have permanently divided Hindu society, right, by carving out the depressed classes from it and declaring them as a religious minority outside Hinduism. And secondly, that it would have institutionalized untouchability. Untouchability was a social evil. It was a social practice. The British did not recognize it as a legal practice. Okay? However, granting separate electorates to the Dalits would have brought this social evil within the legislative councils, where within the councils there would have been clear distinction between the upper caste members and the Dalit members, first of all, and secondly, outside the councils there would have been a clear distinction, a clear break between the upper caste electorates, upper caste voters and the Dalit voters. Okay? So it would have further gone on to reinforce untouchability instead of diluting it, instead of bringing the barriers down. So this was Mahatma Gandhi's reason for opposing the communal award. Now, initially, Dr. Ambedkar was not ready to relent, but Mahatma Gandhi also did not relent. He continued his fast indefinitely. And it was only on the 21st day that Dr. Ambedkar was finally persuaded by the great amount of pressure that was building to visit Mahatma Gandhi, and over there a new agreement was reached. क्या agreement reach हुआ? That the depressed classes would not get any separate electorates. Rather, they would have a reservation with joint electorate. And the Congress agreed that since the depressed classes are underrepresented in the legislature, the amount of seats reserved would be more than double of what they enjoyed at that point of time. Okay? Now, this agreement was finally formalized into a pact between the two sides. This was known as the Poona Pact. Signed by Dr. Ambedkar and Mahatma Gandhi on behalf of the depressed classes, and Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya on behalf of the upper caste Hindus. Okay? So, since both Dr. Ambedkar as well as Mahatma Gandhi were representing the interest of the Dalits, they signed on behalf of the Dalits, while Madan Mohan Malviya, who was representing the interests of the upper classes, upper caste, signed on their behalf. ठीक है? So सुनने में ऐसा लगता है that this was a pact only between Dr. Ambedkar and Mahatma Gandhi, but they were simply coming to the same position. This was their agreed position, but the pact was finally signed with the upper castes. ठीक है? Write down Gandhi's response. At the time of this award, Mahatma Gandhi was imprisoned at the Yerwada jail in Poona. Full stop. He was deeply alarmed. By this announcement, and decided to go on a fast unto death. Full stop. He was opposed to the McDonald Award due to the following reasons. Due to the following reasons. A and B. A. It would have permanently fractured. It would have permanently fractured Hindu society. It would have permanently fractured Hindu society, and thus weakened Indian nationalism as a whole. Weakened Indian nationalism as a whole by dividing Indians further. By dividing Indians further. And B, it would have institutionalized untouchability. It would have institutionalized untouchability. Which was a social evil. Which was a social evil that would have been given constitutional sanction. That would have been given constitutional sanction. And further degraded the relations between the upper castes and the depressed class. Between the upper castes and the depressed classes. Its impact would have been similar to the impact of separate electorates for Muslims. Separate electorates for Muslims. Okay. That is why he went on a fast unto death. Next subheading though, the Poona Pact. The Poona Pact. Facing intense pressure, comma, Dr. Ambedkar visited Mahatma Gandhi on the 21st day of his fast. On the 21st day of his fast. And they agreed. They agreed that A and B. A, the depressed classes would not get separate electorate. Full stop. B, they would have joint electorate. With reservation. That would be double of what they already enjoyed. Full stop. Following this, a pact was signed by Dr. Ambedkar and Mahatma Gandhi representing the depressed classes, and Dr. Madan Mohan Malviya on behalf of the upper caste Hindus. Okay? What was the impact of this Poona Pact? It was able to diffuse the situation and normalize relations between the upper caste and the depressed classes. But was it able to repair the relationship permanently? No. Write down. Significance. लिखो. The McDonald Award had represented a major breach not only within Indian nationalism, but also within the Hindu society. Full stop. It created the potential for open conflict between the depressed classes and upper castes. Full stop. Next point. Therefore, the Poona Pact proved to be a timely intervention that diffused the situation. Full stop. Next point. However, the relationship between Dr. Ambedkar and Mahatma Gandhi could never be repaired fully. Okay? So the situation was like this, that suppose you have a string and it breaks. Even if you tie that string again, the knot is still going to remain, right? The same thing remained over here. So the relationship, so they started working together, they began to cooperate, talk to each other, but the relationship could never go back to its original warmth. To begin with, the relations were not very warm. Neither of them liked each other very much, but the relations after this entire episode were poorer as compared to before. Okay. Next point likho. Now, this had also been a big wake-up call to the upper castes as well as to Mahatma Gandhi. Why? Because now he is going to start his Harijan movement. In earnest, his anti-untouchability program is going to begin. And what is the strategy that he will employ? Once again, the Gandhian strategy of trusteeship and class cooperation. Okay? Next main point likho. Mahatma Gandhi and the Congress leadership had received a major wake up call. So stop. From now on, they exhibited greater sincerity towards the issues of the untouchables. Full stop. Sub point. It was during this episode that Mahatma Gandhi began his Harijan program to end untouchability and emancipate the Dalits. Full stop. Next subpoint. His untouchable emancipation program was based on his philosophies of trusteeship and class cooperation. So, whose behavior do you think it was trying to change? That of the depressed classes or that of the upper castes? It was oriented towards the upper castes. Write down next point. His advocacy for Dalit dignity was directed towards the upper castes, whose attitude and behavior he was trying to change. Okay? Did Dr. Ambedkar agree with this strategy? In his eyes, would this strategy ever succeed? No. Why? Because in the first place, it was the upper castes who had labeled the Dalits as untouchables, who had cast them out of society and had kept them on the margins of the society, historically oppressing them. Therefore, changing the attitudes of the upper castes would not be possible for any leader, however popular or powerful they may be. Okay? And thus, according to Dr. Ambedkar, Mahatma Gandhi was not a real sympathizer of the Dalits, nor did he care about their suffering or their issues. He was simply trying to diffuse the situation and weaken the Dalit movement in order to protect the upper castes. Clear? This was the allegation that Dr. Ambedkar leveled against Mahatma Gandhi. Write down next point. On the other hand, Dr. Ambedkar disapproved of this strategy. Full stop. The point. According to him, comma, the trusteeship model could never succeed. Since it was the upper castes who were responsible for oppressing the Dalits and treating them as untouchables. Full stop. Next point. He accused Mahatma Gandhi of trying to derail the Dalit movement by diffusing the radical momentum that it was gaining. Full stop. He further accused Mahatma Gandhi of being biased towards the upper castes and working to protect the upper caste interests and maintain the social status quo. Okay. Now, in this scenario, both these leaders had very different ideas when it came to addressing untouchability and the poor position of the untouchables, marginalized position of the untouchables. Mahatma Gandhi ने क्या बोला? That the upper castes must exhibit or must engender sympathy towards the Dalits. और वो कैसे होगा? By education first of all. ठीक है? Therefore, he began his newspaper Harijan, which he published widely and which was subscribed to by both the depressed classes as well as the upper castes, in which he brought stories from the households of the Dalits into the reading rooms and the libraries and the drawing rooms of the upper castes, thus establishing a clear link between. Second thing he tried to do through his newspaper, through the Harijan, was to make scriptural arguments against untouchability. He said that untouchability was a practice that was not present in the Hindu religion in its very initial stages. This was a practice that had been introduced much later and represented a corruption of the original faith. Thus, modern Hindus should also not practice it. Thirdly, he tried to encourage upper caste Hindus to see, there was among the upper caste Hindus, manual labor was considered to be something that was demeaning. Okay? It was something that was reserved for the lower section of society, for the depressed classes. And he tried to end this stereotype by encouraging the upper castes to take up manual labor, to donate manual work, or to donate, or shram dan bolte the, right? So to perform shram dan, to donate labor in order to walk a mile in the shoes of the Dalit, but also to realize that the Dalit is also an ordinary person like everybody else, and simply being born into a Dalit family does not make anyone untouchable. Manual labor for him was something that he considered to be divine, and he also tried to link manual labor to the ideas of self-sufficiency, self-reliance, self-respect and Swaraj also. Okay? So this was Mahatma Gandhi's strategy. In contrast, what was Dr. Ambedkar's strategy? He said that since the upper castes were responsible for creating the Varna system and for introducing the caste system, they were the ones who were responsible for the untouchability and stigma suffered by the untouchables, suffered by the depressed classes. Okay? Now, since the system itself was designed to oppress the depressed classes, they would never be able to emancipate themselves within it, and thus the need of the hour was either for the caste system and the Varna system to be dissolved completely, to be destroyed completely. So we talked about the annihilation of the castes, or for the depressed classes to declare themselves as a separate group or a separate religion completely outside Hinduism, and from outside work to restore their dignity. But most importantly, unlike Mahatma Gandhi, Dr. Ambedkar did not believe in preaching to the upper caste. He felt that that was not the appropriate audience when it came to solving the problems of the Dalits. According to him, Dalit problems would have only Dalit solutions. That means only the Dalit people would fight for their emancipation. And this was not something that the upper castes were going to grant to them voluntarily. This was something that they would have to fight and take. So his approach was a more direct and more combative approach. It was oriented towards the people who were actually suffering, towards the oppressed groups rather than the oppressor group. Okay? So for Dr. Ambedkar situation बहुत binary था, upper caste versus the depressed classes. For Mahatma Gandhi, the situation was entirely different. He thought that it could be solved by collaboration, by cooperation and by education. Okay? So next main point लिखो. Dr. Ambedkar and Mahatma Gandhi also differed when it came to the strategy to address untouchability, and caste-based oppression. Subpoint. For Mahatma Gandhi, the solution lay in the Harijan program. Full stop. It involved ABC. A. Educating the upper castes, through his Harijan newspaper, about the suffering of the depressed classes, suffering of the depressed classes, comma, their thinking and their aspirations, and their aspirations. Full stop. This was meant to engender, this was meant to engender empathy for the Dalits, for the Dalits. B, citing religious scripture, citing religious scripture to argue that untouchability, was not part of the original Hindu community, and thus must be discarded, C, to remove the concept of purity and pollution, by claiming that the untouchables are manifestations of the divine, within brackets, Harijan or children of God. And D, to encourage the upper castes to perform manual labor, thus breaking down social taboos and removing the stigma associated with it, Is this clear? Next point, next sub point. So Mahatma Gandhi's strategy you have written. Now Dr. Ambedkar's strategy. Dr. Ambedkar on the other hand, felt that the Gandhian strategy was inherently flawed. Full stop. The Varna and caste systems, were designed to oppress the depressed classes, and thus a radical change was necessary, Next sub point. He advocated for the annihilation of the castes. The annihilation of the castes. Due to its systemically oppressive nature. Due to its systemically oppressive nature. He argued that the Dalits would never be able to live with dignity within a system that was designed to discriminate against, humiliate and oppress them. Thus, the caste and varna distinctions must be destroyed if Dalits were to have any chance at emancipation. Okay? And while making this argument, he was mirroring the thoughts of other prominent Dalit leaders, people such as Periyar, E.V. Ramaswamy Nayakar or Sri Narayan Guru. Now, they had started a very popular depressed classes movement in the region of the Madras Presidency, spreading over primarily Tamil Nadu and Kerala. तो वहाँ पे ये movement सबसे ज़्यादा popular था. One of the results of that movement was that many people in this region began renouncing their surnames. तो आप अभी भी देखोगे तो कई लोग ऐसे हैं who do not use their surnames because that is a marker of their caste identity. Now, this movement was started by the Dalits because they wanted to shed the stigma of their lower caste surname, but because or as education grew, as the Dalit movement became more powerful, as they found more collaborators among the upper caste, even among the upper caste or the Brahmin section of the Tamil society or the Kerala society, many people have stopped using their surnames. Okay? So that is the kind of change that Dr. Ambedkar wanted to see in the overall society of India, throughout India. One of the other recommendations of Periyar was to encourage inter-caste marriages between upper caste men and Dalit women, and the vice versa, upper caste women and Dalit men. The second one was more preferable, since within Hindu society, once an upper caste woman marries a Dalit man, then she as well as her children would lose her upper caste identity. But if these marriages became so frequent that caste barriers become diluted, then caste is going to lose its relevance. So these are the kinds of strategies that Dr. Ambedkar wanted the Dalits to follow. Okay? Failing this, what was the alternative? To leave Hinduism and the caste and varna system behind and declare themselves as a religious minority, as a separate religion. Next point. Next sub point. Inspired by other reformers such as Sri Narayan Guru and E.V. Ramaswamy Nayakar. Periyar. Periyar means big brother. Okay? Periyar. Dr. Ambedkar. Dr. Ambedkar wanted the Dalits. Wanted the Dalits to begin a movement. Against the use of family names or caste denominations Full stop. Similarly, he wanted to encourage intercaste and intervarna marriages to dilute caste and varna distinctions, to dilute caste and varna identities. Full stop. Next subpoint. However, seeing the resistance to such movements, comma, his final solution was that Dalits should permanently leave the systemic oppression that they faced within the Varna and caste system, and consider themselves to be a religious minority distinct from Hinduism. Okay? And in this scenario, what was the opinion of Mahatma Gandhi with regards to the issue of Varna and caste? Did he also advocate for their destruction like Dr. Ambedkar? No. He said that Varna and caste have always been part of Hindu society, and in this he mirrored the teachings of the Arya Samaj. Right? Arya Samaj ka idea kya tha? Go back to the Vedas wala. Even in the Rig Veda you find mention of Varnas, fourfold Varna system. But what Mahatma Gandhi did advocate for was that the Rig Vedic version of Varna must be imbibed. Right? So, for example, in the Rig Veda, it was mentioned that the Varna of an individual was to be decided by a Vidwan, that is a learned, wise person, on the basis of his swabhav, his gun, and his ability, right? His nature, his qualities, and his abilities, his merit. Mahatma Gandhi wanted that kind of a thing. He felt that it was important to socially order this Hindu society into different varnas because it brings about efficiency. But he did not want the rigidity that had become associated with modern varna and caste. Okay? So while Dr. Ambedkar proposed the complete annihilation of the caste system, Mahatma Gandhi proposed a reform of the caste system. And like his other reforms, he was also going to appeal for this to the upper castes only. He did not want the Dalits to begin any movement against the upper caste. देखो idea यहाँ पे हमेशा वही होगा that he wanted to induce greater cooperation and collaboration among all Indians of all varieties. So class cooperation वाला concept यहाँ पे भी exist करेगा. Is this clear? Now, as far as Dr. Ambedkar was concerned, by the time of independence, he came to realize that caste is not going to either be destroyed or change appreciably. Therefore, it was time to leave Hinduism. Now, if they leave Hinduism, then which religion to opt for? There were several options in front. The three most prominent being Christianity, Islam and Buddhism. Okay? Or Jainism bhi. Now, problem with Jainism, it was almost indistinct from Hinduism, and therefore even if the depressed classes converted to Jainism, they would not be able to you can say shed their stigma, and the society is going to quickly fall back into its established pattern of oppression. Take Christianity, problem was that it was not an Indian religion, it was a foreign religion, and that the Dalits would not be able to let us say express their religious urges to pursue their spiritual goals within Christianity as they had been accustomed to. Okay? Thirdly, third option was Islam. This was also considered very deeply by Dr. Ambedkar and finally rejected. Why? Because by this point of time, India had already undergone a very painful partition following a long period of communal violence between Hindus and Muslims. If Dalits converted en masse to Islam, then this would have created a very dangerous situation. Okay? And secondly, there are certain problems inherent within Islam also. Okay? For example, the mistreatment of women or the underprivileged section of women, the high amount of patriarchy, the problematic messaging when it comes to the treatment of other religions. So it was not suitable for a secular society like India, and this left the only other option, that was Buddhism. Buddhism first of all had been introduced by Gautam Buddha as a reformative religion. So its purpose was to address the faults of the society, and one of these things was also addressing the class divide within the society, the divide between haves and have-nots. It was a religion of peace. It was an Indian religion, so most Indians would not have a problem with it, and it was far enough distinct from modern Hinduism that Dalits would be able to maintain a distinct identity within Neo Buddhism, but at the same time it was not so distinct that Hindus would have you can say reacted violently to it as they were liable to when it came to Islam. ठीक है, तो ये डॉक्टर अंबेडकर का स्ट्रैटेजी. क्लियर? तो राइट डाउन नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट. By the time of independence, by the time of independence, comma, it had become clear that both Gandhi as well as Ambedkar had failed when it came to addressing untouchability and emancipating the untouchables and emancipating the Dalits. Full stop. Therefore, Dr. Ambedkar resolved to encourage the Dalits to leave the fold of Hinduism, and convert to a system that did not consider them impure or untouchable. Full stop. Subpoint. He considered several options as the new religion of the Dalits. The most prominent among them were Jainism, Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism. Next subpoint, A, B, C, D. A. Jainism नहीं, Jainism से शुरू करते हैं. Jainism was rejected since modern Jainism was almost indistinguishable from modern Hinduism. And converting to it would have presented the danger of the revival of the established pattern of the society. ठीक है. Next, B. Christianity was rejected since it was considered too foreign and unfamiliar. Full stop. It may have alienated the Dalits from their indigenous roots and thus created hurdles in both their spiritual journey, as well as national integration, ठीक है. नेक्स्ट सी. कौन सा है? इस्लाम. हाँ, इस्लाम was rejected because Dr. Ambedkar was concerned about the future of Dalit women within the highly patriarchal Islamic society. Full stop. Further, historically, the conversion of untouchables to Islam had not sufficiently ended their social marginalization. Full stop. And most importantly, the country had recently undergone a painful partition accompanied with massive bouts of communal violence between Hindus and Muslims. If Dalits were to embrace Islam en masse, it could spark another communal pogrom. communal pogrom. ठीक है. डी लिखो. Dr. Ambedkar finally settled on Buddhism due to its Indian roots and the reformative nature of its teachings. Full stop. It was distinct enough that Dalits would be able to maintain their separate identity but not so indistinct, sorry, but not so distinct, but not so distinct that they would feel alienated. They would feel alienated. Okay? And that is why after independence, almost in his final days, in a massive rally, he converted to Buddhism along with several followers. Okay? So this was the Gandhi-Irwin Pact as well as the caste debate between Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. Ambedkar. Clear है इतना? Now we have addressed all these things. तो Gandhi-Irwin Pact तक का हो गया, civil disobedience movement खत्म हो गया है. Now we are going to talk about some other developments that were taking place during the civil disobedience movement at this point of time. Namely, during the Indian national movement. Namely, the post-strategic debate within the Congress as well as the emergence of left within the Congress. Okay. Following that, we are going to look at the developments leading to the establishment of Congress governments in several provinces after the 1937 elections and the process of their simultaneous resignation in 1939. 28 months of Congress rule. वो हमको करना है. That we will be doing in tomorrow's class. Tomorrow's class is going to take place at the normal time, morning 8 a.m. Okay. Chaliye. Any doubts? No? Alright. Thank you for your time.